Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And joining me today is another author making her official debut here on the channel. My guest today began writing her story in solo at the age of 12, though her family states her journey in storytelling started long before that. She has spent close to 5 years writing the story of the Eclipse series, and the pages of her book reflect pieces of her soul. And she's thrilled to soon share this with everyone. Creative writing and reading has always been a passion of hers. She's a fantasy and romance enthusiast with a long list of fictional boyfriends. She will be tiresome choosing between the two. Just kidding, Tatum. She's also the proud owner of a dog and 4 rescue cats, all with book character names and a rapidly increasing number of fish. And as she states, don't get guppies. And she spends much of her time outside with pen and paper and with her friends. So without further ado, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, author Tatum Carrington. Tatum, thank you so much for coming on the show this evening.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here for sure.
Awesome, Tatum. So, before we dive into your book in solo of the Eclipse series, is there anything else you would like to add about your background? And do you have copies of your book to share with our viewers and listeners to get an idea?
All right, so I'm actually 17 years old, so I'm a teen author. This is obviously my first book, so I'm really excited. And I like to, with my page and with my writing, I hope to reach a lot of other teen authors to kind of help encourage them. So I'm part of a lot of communities. That's kind of a lot of who I am as a person. So this is my paperback. This is available on Amazon currently. The second copy I have here is my hardcover. This is actually a special edition, and it's not available yet, but it will be. It's been announced, and it will be available in the upcoming months. So it'll be exclusively through my website, and it has like this really pretty full spread. So I actually designed both covers with the help of a friend. So they are self-designed. So yeah.
Awesome. And I think, Tatum, you've just established a new milestone here on the channel. If I'm not mistaken, you are probably the youngest author featured on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. So that is a huge accomplishment. I don't think I've had a teen author or young adult author on the show making their official debut. So that is huge. So before I dive in, I just want to give a huge congratulations for that. And from what I was able to read a little bit about your story, I'm very, very intrigued by the world building and the lore. And I don't want to spoil it for viewers and listeners. So, Tatum, would you like to give a brief teaser into your series, Eclipse, and the first book in solo?
So are you talking about the world building specifically or the series as a whole?
The series as a whole and what the first book entails.
Okay, so the first book opens up with the beginning of the story of Azariah Albanchia. She's my main character, and she's very similar to myself in a lot of ways. She's essentially who I wanted to be when I was a kid. Like I wanted to be strong like she was, and so I kind of wrote her to reflect the actual way the teenage mind works. So I kept her very raw and unfiltered, and a lot of like I'll have some people tell me they don't like that, but a lot of people actually find a way to connect with it very deeply. So it follows her story as she tries to figure out who she is as a person and her place in the world that she's been born into. So she's born as a second born princess of Wyveria. And in my world, there's a continent called Ivia. It's divided in half by a fence. And there's two sides, Wyveria and Vandalia. And they are polar opposites in almost every way, but they used to be united as one. So in her story, she's waiting to develop a power. And many fantasy authors take this route a lot, where like the main character opens up with getting their power. So in the very beginning of the book, she does not have a power, and she has to figure out why she doesn't have one, because she's supposed to have one by now. And so when she develops her power, it's not from her side of the border, and so it kind of triggers this chain of events where she's trying to figure out why she might have this other power, and it kind of invokes a lot of unrest throughout the country, and kind of the plot line kind of goes from there. So
Fascinating. That actually sounds almost very much like to another book that I read. And that's what the thing about fantasy is that these certain themes are interchangeable. And I'm now very curious of how this story came about. So let's go back to the beginning, Tatum. So let's start at the beginning. So for you growing up, were you always a creative person, or did that creative streak come about later in life? Maybe from like a family friend, a family member, a teacher you had growing up?
I'm not entirely sure, honestly. When I was a kid, I really liked fairies, like the Disney fairies, like the fairy movies. And
Hmm.
Peter Pan was like a huge thing for me. So like when I was a kid, like my grandmother, she pretended to be Peter Pan and we would stay at her house. And so she would write letters back and forth overnight to us. And so like I'd write Peter Pan letters and my grandma, Peter Pan, would write back. And so that kind of made like this love for like fictional like storylines and stuff for me. And then as I got older and like I learned that that stuff wasn't real, and everything, I took over that role. So I built this entire society for my sisters. I have two younger sisters, and so I would hide these little fairy figurines around the yard, and like I made up this whole story about a planet that they come from, and like they were collecting fairy dust for this one reason. So it became this like really interactive storyline,
Mm.
for my sisters and I. And I actually think I wrote a like short book about that. I don't think it was a full book, but so that's kind of where it started. And then like after that, like I just have stories in my head, and I just enjoy telling them a lot. So.
Awesome. So from that moment, what would you say was the aha moment when you want to take the story that's been with you and actually put it on paper?
So the fairy story is actually completely unrelated, but with In Solo and the Eclipses trilogy in general, I actually don't entirely know what started that series. So I know I was like 11 or 12. I think it was in the middle of the COVID pandemic,
Mm.
and I like was up at like 3 in the morning for whatever reason, and I just like had this idea. And like I didn't even like have to think of the characters' names, like they just kind of existed in my head. And so I had like this little thin Sharpie, not even a Sharpie pen, it was like one of the it was like pink, and I just started writing, and then, like, I was, like, a terrible prologue, and I rewrote it, like, 7 different times, so, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, you're probably now in like the list of like a lot of authors who first stories was born out of the pandemic. Like my first story, The Gathering, was literally born out of that. So yeah, that was a time, a very interesting time for all authors because it gave us a time to create our stories and share it during a very different time. But it is very fascinating from what you told me, like the world building and crafting this story. And I'm just so amazed that all this imagination that's been with you growing up just somehow was able to go onto the page and just create it. So now let's actually go ahead. Now let's actually go forward to where you're drafting the first version of In Solo. So when you began writing the first paragraph or maybe first page of In Solo, what were the goals you had going forward as the author, but also the promises you were making to your future readers?
So I think for it was so when I started the book, it had multiple different purposes. For me, it was kind of a way of me to escape, like, my own mind, and, like, that sounds
Mm.
weird, but, like, I have an anxiety disorder, so for me, it was, like, a way for me to almost get out of, like, my own head and kind of, like but also at the same time explore more of who I was. And so it meant a lot to me personally. Like that book is really driven from my heart. But also, I think it was also a way for me to connect to other teenagers I knew were going through similar experiences to me,
Hmm.
where like a lot of times our thoughts don't always make sense and they're always like my main character, she's very angry. And it's sometimes it's like, is she so angry? But for a lot of teenagers, that's kind of how we feel in our minds. And so I kind of liked exploring those ideas so the readers could kind of relate to the main character. And I think it's also a little bit of like teenage slash female empowerment, just kind of to boost that so people can have more relatable characters. So that was
Absolutely,
kind of my intention.
100%. And what you actually brought about with like, you know, the anxiety for teenagers for, you know, nowadays growing up and, you know, the kind of things they're experiencing and how books are meant to be an escapism from that reality, a safe space. You actually touched on something that we're actually going to cover a little bit later in the interview. So I thank you for bringing that up. So now going forward, so after you've written the first draft, I'm curious, did you do any beta reads or arc reads for the book, or did you simply share the book with friends and family who knew that you were writing this book? And if so, what was the feedback like? Overly positive, heavily critical, or somewhere down the middle?
So when I first drafted it, I think I had probably like 6 or 7 different drafts. Like I would like restart. Sometimes I wouldn't finish completely. I know I
Mm.
have like an unfinished draft of like 113,000 words. I don't know where it was going, but so things like that. So it was definitely a long process. But I like to give a shout out to one of my best friends of all time. My dog's barking. I'm so sorry.
You're
Rebecca
fine.
Allen, and so she actually was like one of the first people I ever shared the story with to begin with, and so I sent her my first draft like after I'd been working on it for probably like 6 months, and I was like, hey, I just like was writing this book. Do you want to read it? And so she kind of started reading it, and she got really involved in the characters too. So she would help me a lot with like plot stuff and building all that. And so she was like my first, you could say alpha reader. I think that's what we usually
Mm.
call those. So she was like an alpha slash beta reader, and so she helped me in so many ways with that. But once I got closer to the end, I actually did have several rounds of beta reading. I had a sign up sheet, and I think I had like 40-ish beta readers sign up. I couldn't take everyone, obviously, but
Hmm.
I did have a good amount of people read it. I had a lot of teachers from my school read it, like friends of friends, like adults and stuff. And I have a
Hmm.
couple people that are like out of state that usually read for me too. And so they'll be staying for book two as well. And so I think for the feedback, it was fairly positive. I had some people um really not like Azariah, and that's totally valid. I had it was kind of it was more positive. It was definitely like more skewed that direction, but I did have some people be very critical of Azariah. And at first I was very concerned about that because I was like, why would they not like her as much? Like I made her to be relatable. And I realized that it's because like we don't like ourselves at that age, and also teenagers aren't very likable at that age anyways. And so with the plot development, I think that's something that I'm trying to tie in more in book two, especially to keep building her character arc, because I've had a lot of compliments on how she changes throughout the book. And so that's something I'm very proud of. So
Awesome.
overall, pretty positive though. Absolutely.
So would you say that from those interactions and the reviews and comments that you've gotten, that they validated your goals going forward with not just this book, but also the other books in the series?
Absolutely. My goal was really just to reach people. I could not have asked for a better like debut launch. I've sold over 100 copies, and that's like beyond what I could have ever asked for because it's not even been two
Congratulations.
months. Thank you so much. And so one of those things that took me by surprise with this whole process is my mom's a teacher at like the middle school of my town, and a lot of her students and former students had come to her to ask, and they bought my book. And so actually, I think I found this out today. One of my mom's students, who's actually in my exact target age group, about seventh grade female, and she read the entire book in like 2 days, and then she restarted it because she enjoyed it so much. And so for me, like having that's my target age group. So I wanted like people in that area where that's when I started the book, was that age. And so reaching those people and helping empower them, making them enjoy the story so much that they were able to relate enough to reread it, that's certainly that more than achieves my goals. So absolutely.
You were saying before, Tatum, that you wanted this story to really resonate with teenagers and young adults, to give them a sense of empowerment. And I think that's very beautiful. And there is a sense of vulnerability when we create our very first stories and not just share them with our friends and family, but also publish them. And that raises the stakes of anxiety as also imposter syndrome. And what I found, and I definitely think you may agree to this, Tatum, is that social media nowadays is a huge tool for authors. It allows us to reach new audiences, new writing groups, new author groups, and that's the most beautiful thing about social media. However, like everything, there's a negative, and social media is no exception. It's a double-edged sword. You do open yourself up, unfortunately, to the haters, trolls, negative comments, everything, the works. And that raises the anxiety so much. And again, imposter syndrome is always in the back of our head saying that no one's going to read this, no one's going to enjoy this. Why are you wasting your time? So I'm curious, Tatum, have you ever had those moments of imposter syndrome and anxiety? And so, what has disciplined you to continue not just with writing your debut novel, but also expanding on it and make it into a series?
So I've certainly dealt with a lot of anxiety. I've actually dealt with some opposition from my own peers for writing my book. And I'm not going to go into that because it's not necessary.
Of
But
course.
facing that really put it into my head where I was like, I've been very afraid that my book wouldn't do well. I mean, the weeks leading up, I was like, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. Like, I'm never going to make it. And so I was obviously shocked by the turnout that I ended up having. But I think, hold on, I just lost my train of thought. But how I deal with that is I remind myself why I'm doing this. So
Mm,
why I'm doing it is for me, for my readers, for people that experience similarly to the way I do, like the way people view the world. if it's a similarity to me, I strive to reach those people. And so for me, like, I think actually 2 days ago, I got into one of those moments where I was like, I'm not good enough. Like, I'm never going to make it. And
Hmm.
so instead of forcing myself, because I made it a New Year's resolution this year to write every single day. And so far, I've actually done that. Now it doesn't matter what project it's on. It can be like poetry because I write poetry on the side too. It can be on my
Oh,
second book,
nice.
unrelated series. So I got into my head like 2 days ago and I was like freaking out and I was like, I'm not good enough. Like this isn't ever going to be good enough. So I took a break and I said, I'm not going to open my document today. I'm not working on book 2 at all. And I actually worked on some poems that I was working on for another project of mine. And it really helped me. And then like the next day I was reminding myself, like, this is why you do this, Tatum. It's because you care. It's because this helps me. And it all in all, my writing helps me to process my own emotions and to like kind of understand the world around me because it is a reflection of society how I see it as well, which
Mm.
is why it explores polarization, extremism, religious extremism especially. So exploring those ideas, like that's why I do it. It's for the people to get a glimpse of who I am and also to help myself out of the little spots I get into. But yes, I definitely face a lot of anxiety around the release. The second book, I am terrified to live up to the first book because I know people enjoyed the first book a lot so far. And so I'm like, I just hope I can live up to it in the second book. So, but certainly.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's actually probably, a lot of things among the many things authors are always nervous is it's like the follow up in their own series. Sequelitis. We usually use that term for like movies, but it's also the same thing for books. Is the second one going to be, an improvement on the first? And then again, that gets into our heads that, how do we improve upon, a story like this? And that all comes with, time and growth as authors and understanding what kind of writer we want to be for ourselves. And that then leads into what I like to call the business portion of the interview, the business side of being an author. Now, Tatum, I am curious. So for this book and your future books, am I under the impression that you went the self-publishing route, or did you go through a hybrid or an independent press?
So I chose self-publishing for my first book. I'd considered querying people for it to see if I could get into a traditional publishing company. But at 17 years old, I was afraid. Like when I did some like reading up online about it, I realized that a lot of times traditional companies can take advantage of you, especially when
Mhm.
you're young, because they know that you don't know very much better. And so for me, I decided I wanted full control over this first book, especially because this series is so close to my heart and soul. Like this is like such a piece of who I am as a person. I didn't feel comfortable handing off that control anywhere else. And not saying traditional
Right.
publishing companies are bad at all. Like I would like to go that route sometime in the future, but not with this series. So with this series,
Mm.
I wanted to be able to control seeing everything, distributing it. I wanted to be able to design my own cover and make sure I felt comfortable with it. And so that's why I self-published through Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing, so the KDP department. So
Right.
that's what I did. So yeah.
Nice. And actually, I'm glad you brought up, editors and also the illustrations, because those are also very important too. The research, understanding like, okay, is this person going to be the right fit for me? So can you tell us about that process of publishing your book?
So with editing, I did not use a professional editor, which may be a little bit like kind of controversial. But for me, I'd considered working with one in the past, but I couldn't find one that suited the needs I really wanted.
Mm.
That was also in my price range. So I chose to put those funds towards an actual like professional fantasy map. So there's a fantasy map in the front of my book, and I'll have to show that at
Oh,
some point.
nice.
Yes, I will definitely show that at some point. But so I had a friend who I had multiple English teachers on that document, and I had a lot of like adults on the document as well because I'm terrible with grammar. I can't even lie, like I'm
Right.
so bad at grammar. And so with my beta readers, after they all were going through, I had someone like in depth edit it for me, and so she's amazing. Shout out to Nikki Rapp, she's amazing. So she did a lot of that for me, and a lot of other people kind of pitched in. Beta readers helped me correct grammar too, and so I kind of did a final read through, and I felt like it was fine. So I know it definitely has some typos in it, but I feel like what novel doesn't have a typo? So
Yeah, that is definitely true. There's always going to be a typo every now and then. Now, what about the cover itself, the illustration? How did that come about? Was that something that you had from the beginning, or is that sort of like collection of ideas you worked with an illustrator or a graphics designer? Can you tell us about that?
I'll actually show it then. So I had no idea what I wanted when I first started writing the book. Like I didn't realize I was ever going to publish it when I started
Mm.
writing it until people were like, "This is good, Tatum. You should publish it." So I finally did. But my front cover, I designed this part myself. I
Oh,
got so
that is
stuck.
beautiful.
Thank you. I used Canva actually, so I did all of it myself. And I was really proud of it because it looked great. I had some people like play with some ideas, so some people definitely helped me like influence where I wanted to go with it.
Mhm.
But I got stuck on the back cover, so my friend Adeline, she was the one who helped me design the back cover. So it's got this little prophecy on the back and like little flowers and stuff, and so I really love it. And then with the hardcover, we also designed it. Adeline and I did. So it's this full spread. Let me see if I can show the full spread. So it's got, yeah, that's what it looks like. So it's got this like
Ooh,
nice
okay.
gradient. So yeah, we designed that ourselves too. So yeah, I've never actually paid for an illustrator or a designer. I've thought about getting like character art done at some point in the next series, but or the next books or whatever. But yeah, so I did do the designs myself. So
Wow, that is really, really good, I have to say. And also for your paperback, when you're showing the back cover, I'm not gonna lie, it reminded me of the scene from Lord of the Rings, first one, where Gimli and company, or Frodo and company, are in front of the mines of Moria, and there's that door that lights up, and it has that same shape. Instantly, I thought of that, but my goodness, Tatum, that is incredible. That is really, really well done. And that again goes to show, like, you are very, very serious about, not only your story, but to show people, like, I know what I'm doing. Like, I know that this is what's going to fit with my story. I know what it needs and everything, but I'm just blown away by everything you've done so far. So now let's go to another aspect of the business, which is understanding your audience. Now, this is a two-part. We're going to talk about the audience, and then we're going to go about the individual readers and then the age group. So regarding the audience is probably like the big thing that all of us authors struggle with on a daily basis when it comes to writing our stories. Because for us, we're the target audience first and foremost before we publish it. But when we do publish it, we then have to go through the whole process of, like, okay, what category is this? Okay, fantasy, thriller, etc., and finding out what audience are we going for. Are we going for fans of Lord of the Rings, fans of Banshee, etc.? That is all a hassle and sometimes tedious, but it is necessary. So for you, Tatum, did you have a good understanding of your audience before or after you finished the book? And in your professional opinion, when should an author take into account their audience?
so I think I knew the target audience, maybe not in specifically like those terms until I took a marketing class, which I took this year, and my teacher helped me like significantly to get this book actually on the
Hmm.
market. But that's actually how I got it out this in this timeline. But that's a story for later. But so with my target audience, I think when I was writing the story, I kind of knew who it was written for because I knew it was written for myself and also the younger versions of myself and people that were similar to that, which I've touched on that a couple times on here. But after I took a marketing class and after the book came out, became more apparent to me like the margins of the actual story. So I
Mm.
realized it's more like a 13, 14 and up story. Originally, like I think I have it set to like 12 on Amazon, but there is a
Mm.
lot of swearing in the book, so I understand that that's not for like all 12-year-olds, but I have had 12-year-olds read it and enjoy it. Um, so yes, certainly, I think in my professional, I don't know if I'm considered professional, but sure, we'll go with it. Opinion for like figuring out your target audience, I think that's something that should happen during when you're conceiving the idea because like I obviously didn't do that because I wrote this when I was like 11 or 12, so like that doesn't necessarily factor in here. But with my other series that I have like concepts of in the back of my mind for like when I'm done with this series, um, I definitely have considered like who it's for. Like who am I writing this for? Who's going to read it? And
Hmm.
how can I tailor this book to meet those needs? Because especially with like book talk and all the online social media surrounding
Hmm.
literature right now, there is definitely very specific like I don't know if you'll say clicks, but like there's very narrow margins in certain areas and like what people want out of fantasy, and that's
Yes.
my predominant area. So certainly, like I've definitely gone down that rabbit hole too to see what people want, and I've also tried to figure out like how can I work that into the series I also want to write. So yeah, definitely during the like the conception of the idea. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. And I was going to make a comment, like, you are a professional, Tam. I mean, from what you just told me right now, the fact you did a marketing class to help you get your book to like the right audience. I mean, you are like ahead of the curve. Like, I'm still struggling with marketing, but here you are like soaring. So don't ever downplay like your achievements. Like, you're an author. I'm telling you this right now. You are an author. So I just want you to know that. But going
Thank you.
forward from that, now looking at the reader side, I think the reader side is probably the most challenging because, yes, the audience is the big circle, the big group you want to target. But the readership, those individual people who are going to pick up your story, is a challenge. And that goes into, the three big groups: YA, new adult, and adult fiction. And especially within young adult, I've had a lot of authors who specialize in that style of writing or in that genres of writing. There is a challenge to where you want your characters to be believable, that they act their age. Because I'm sure you have read books, Tatum, that are supposed to be YA, but reading them, it's like he acts too much like a 20-year-old, or scenarios are very unrealistic. So for you, when crafting your story to fit in that specific style of writing, or for that age group in particular, was that a challenge?
Um, so sorry, can you restate the question like a little more clear? Sorry.
Oh,
I
of
kind of
course. No problem.
I'm
So,
distracted all the time, so go ahead.
oh, you're perfectly fine. So, when focusing on the readership itself, and understanding, the age group, especially when it comes to like writing characters in that age group, because most commercial fiction, the characters are usually in their 20s or their 30s. But for YA, the characters are usually before that. And sometimes it's difficult to make believable YA characters that fit the age group. So for you, when you were writing this story, did you have an easier time writing these characters because you were the same age as the characters?
Yes. Okay. Sorry, I didn't understand that the first time, but yes, absolutely.
No
So
problem.
for me so I'm currently 17 and my character is about to turn 17 where I'm in the second book. So she starts out at 16. So for me right now, this is like the prime time to be writing it. Actually, I'd say like 2 years ago was probably good for me to be writing it because I could write at like a little bit higher of an age group because I think
Hmm.
I'm considered mature for my age. And so I definitely have found it way easier to write those characters because I am in that age group. As I'm getting older though, I'm having to like make the conscious realization that I need to tone them back a bit because they shouldn't know everything that they know. So that's something I'm struggling with in the second book, is making sure that I don't make them act too intelligent for their age. Because in the first book, I was really working to capture that immaturity and like the growth that they
Right.
still have to go through. So that's certainly something that I enjoy writing that actually. That's one of my favorite aspects of my books, is that I can write characters that are young enough to appeal to younger audiences and making sure they're realistic. I've been praised on that a couple times. So
Awesome.
certainly.
And as a little add on to that, do you think that, well, actually, one of my guests from last year actually brought this up, doing something very similar. He's writing actually books for his kids, and the characters in his book grow and age in the series. Do you think for your book in particular that you may be doing that as well, that your characters will be aging with the story with the readers whenever they pick this up?
I actually was thinking about that whole concept like a few days ago. Absolutely. Absolutely. My intention has always been to see the character grow throughout the series, like as they grow up, as they get older, because there's so many elements that I can't explain without spoiling the series.
Of
That
course.
definitely, like, that's 100% my intention, is to show that how they grow. I think they'll definitely grow with the readers as well. If the book sits with the right readers and they enjoy it the way that I hope that they will, I certainly think that they'll be able to grow up with the characters, and that's kind of something that I hope to do. Because like with series like Percy Jackson, Keeper of the Lost Cities, things like that I read as a kid,
Hmm.
those characters certainly got me through those teenage years. Because honestly, I think that now, like that middle teenage years right now are so hard, especially in the society, that I think a lot of people lean on those fictional characters, like I definitely did. And so I
Hmm.
kind of hope to create that, like, so they can grow up with the characters and kind of lean on them a little bit. So absolutely.
Absolutely, 100%. That's almost similar for me growing up. Like the books I read were the Redwall books by Brian Jocks. Absolutely love those books. They're pretty much kid version of Game of Thrones. And I'm not even joking, viewers and listeners. That's literally it. It's literally animal characters in a medieval world, and they do kill each other, and sometimes beloved characters die. It's a kid Game of Thrones, but I 100% agree that during like those years, like middle school into high school, books like those are really comforting. And going back to what we said before, that they're a safe space for us to delve into these kinds of works, these imaginations of the author. And, for us ourselves as authors, we're always going to take that with us into our own writings, which then leads to another powerful question. So I'm going to give context for this, Tatum, to help you with this. So a year ago, I had a guest on the show, Eric Bowden, and the original question I asked for this part of the interview was, who were the authors and or books that helped you form your authorial voice? And he did give his answers to that, but then he added on to that and changed the question entirely, which was, I could list all of these famous people, all of these books, but at the end of the day, when a person picks up my book, I want them to hear my voice, because I'm not trying to be like so and so. I'm not trying to write like so and so. This book is not this meets that. It's not. It's my own work. And I think as an author, that is a real struggle to do, because we're always going to be inspired by the books we've read growing up. And I'm sure you've seen books and school, Tatum, that have had the tagline that says, so and so meets so and so. Now, from a reader's point of view, that's going to grab our interest. Even if we've never read those books to begin with, we have an idea. But from an author's point of view, as you point out, that's not really good, because it boxes us into these categories, whether we are supposed to write like this author, or our stories are supposed to go a certain way, or our presentation of characters or the world building supposed to be this. And it shouldn't be like that. We shouldn't be pigeonholed into certain categories. Yes, we could have preferences of what we like to write. Like, I write historical fiction and fantasy, but that doesn't mean those are my only genres. Same for you, Tina. Like, you have your specific genres that you are comfortable writing in. That's not to say you won't experiment with other genres. So ultimately, Tatum, here is the question. When writing in solo of the Eclipse series, how did you balance not just only your individuality as the author, but also showing reverence and respect to the books that you've read growing up, as well as the authors who have inspired you?
So I was definitely inspired by a lot of different authors when I wrote this. But I do completely understand the balance between writing your own individual piece and taking too much out of other authors' work.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had it compared to a lot of things, including like the writing style being compared to Fourth Wing, Twilight, the Red Queen series, a few others I can't think of, Powerless, I think. But ultimately, I have thought of the same thing where you want it to be like more unique. Like, I don't want it to be like, oh, this is really similar to this book. Like, so people think it's like the same. I definitely want there to be like an individual voice. So it's definitely something that you struggle to find the balance between. So for me, I definitely try to, I'd read books while I write.
Mm-hmm.
Like on the side, I'll definitely read books, but I don't like to let myself get totally wrapped into a series while simultaneously writing, in case I draw too much inspiration from that series. So that's one technique I use to avoid that. And also just channeling, making sure like I reread my own writing before I keep writing. Like, I'll read like the scene that I was writing to make sure like I'm not tying in too much of something else. And like, I've even like, I'll have beta readers, they've checked it for me and been like, hey, this is really similar to like this scene. Make sure you're not like taking too much of another like inspiration. So it's certainly a balance, but I do think that's something I do well with my writing, is making sure that it's very distinguished from other popular series, because I don't want to be one of those people that's like copying and like it's like a knockoff, you know?
Absolutely. And that kind of leads into something that I've learned myself, and I always like to share this with my guests, is that long time ago, when I was at a writing conference at a library, there was one author who said that writers are liars, cheaters, and thieves. We make stuff up, we cheat people out of time, and we steal from each other because the same story has been told numerous times. And yes, there is truth in that. The same types of stories have been told. But for me, now I have written 3 books now, and having gotten a good understanding of myself as an author, I've moved away from that and follow the 3 E's, which, from what you've told me of your book and your series, Tatum, that it also follows the 3 E's, which are to educate, entertain, and enlighten. Obviously, we want to entertain our readers. That is the primary objective. But to educate and enlighten, that comes with skill and just time and practice and hard work and just understanding who we are. So for you, would you say that your book falls under those three E's, or what are your thoughts on the three E's as a writer?
So definitely agree with that. Education is another one that I try to target with my book. Um, Especially with my own like political views in society and everything, especially right now, is I definitely played into like religious extremism. And like I tried to like tie in aspects of that in the book. So like religion in my book is like a very specific thing. Like it's actually like a physical concept in there. Like there's physical gods. And with that, I tried to make it so the reason the countries are divided is because of religion. But the religion's a physical thing. So I kind of tied into like extremism. So I definitely think education is absolutely a part of my book because it serves as a bit of a warning, as most dystopian novels do. I do think that I have room to grow in all of those aspects as it is my
Mm-hmm.
first novel and I am young. Um, so while I think that I definitely touched on a lot of those, I don't think I did it perfectly yet, and I hope that I can in the future touch on all those things. I'm not saying I did it badly or anything, but I think that that's not a judgment for me to make. I think it's a judgment
Right.
for the readers to make. So
Absolutely, 100%. And going back to the readers, I think another thing that is important is when we write our first stories, and this touches again to, the authors and the influences that we've had growing up. Nowadays, in the publishing world, there's always going to be a new book that's going to be out that everyone wants to be a part of. And then going back to like Book Talk, Bookstagram, there's always going to be promoting a new book that, hitting the masses. Good for them. But you definitely have the issue of everyone trying to get the gravy train, trying to write a book that's similar. And a lot of authors I've had on the show agree that that's not always the best thing to do because it's not your best writing, it's not who you are, and your readers are going to notice that. So, Tatum, what is your thoughts on, this discussion of writing for clicks, writing for trends in the publishing world? And did you actually learn something similar to that in your marketing class from your teacher?
okay, so this might be a controversial opinion, but I'm gonna go and put it out there. So I personally absolutely hate the hockey romance fad right now. I cannot stand it. So I've noticed with the whole book talk thing, it can be a very great thing and it can also be
Mm-hmm.
very detrimental to other authors because they're so analytical of everything and they're also so trend focused. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with like Bookstagram Book Talk. I found it personally helpful in a lot of
Right.
aspects, but there's definitely some negative aspects of everything that comes to social media. So one thing I've noticed is like there's a very specific narrow um genre of like hockey romance right now. I'm just using that as an example because like it's an example right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't like it. And it's because I feel like even though like I've read a couple books here and there myself, like I read a little bit of every genre, um, they're all focused on like the same plot line and the same character ideas because readers like these like I love fictional men. I love fictional men, but a lot of people are creating all these fictional men. They're basically the same because they know that the readers will like it. And while I
Mm.
understand creating these characters so people will like them, we also have to consider the fact that like is that your unique writing and are you actually like contributing to the literature of the world like because literature is meant to like, explore so many different concepts and I
Right.
don't really enjoy when things are so narrow with the whole
Mm-hmm.
concept that it becomes like unoriginal and repetitive. And so that's something I've noticed with like current literature that's definitely trending that way. But no, I absolutely prefer to try to read more books that are more unique. Like high fantasy is so cool to me because I know these authors spend so much time building like these crazy worlds. I could never, but good for them. And so yes, that's kind of how I feel about that is that I think it's really important as an author to find your own narrative voice and your own ideas to create your own worlds. So for sure.
Absolutely, 100%. And also to add to that is, other authors saying that you need to add, or other people saying that you need to add this element into your book because that's what's popular. And a lot of guests say that that's, really bad. You shouldn't do that. Like an example, spice. There are a lot of books that have spice in them. And there are authors that who write that, not trying to bash anyone. But what I'm trying to say is that more authors are feeling pressured into adding unnecessary elements into their book that don't make sense, but they're doing it because they know people are going to pick it up because it has that specific element, whether it's like spice or a type of romance. Like I kid you not, I've seen a lot of people into like the monster romance, like werewolf romance. It's crazy. Again, not trying to bash anybody, but it's really, again, detrimental that, as authors, we feel pressured to add stuff. We shouldn't. We should be able to write our own types of stories. And also, adding into that, here's another reflective question, which it's a big one, Tatum. So brace yourself. This is a very, very heavy hitter one. So,
Could you give me
so I've been doing podcasting now for 6 years. It's absolutely crazy. I never thought I would be doing podcasting for, that long of a time, but uh here I am. And in the process of, doing podcasting, sorry, I've had the opportunity to meet, oh no, you're good. I've had the opportunity to meet a wide range of different authors from different backgrounds, different walks of life, different periods in their life. And ultimately, I've learned so much from them. And I'm sure you've also learned a lot too from other authors you've met on social media or maybe in person. And for me, what I've learned is that for authors, there are two roads for us. One road is to be an author, and that is a person who's dedicated to the art of storytelling, not solely motivated by capital, but let's be honest, as indie authors, it's nice to get a little green here and there. And the other path is to be known as an author. That's an individual who is dedicated solely to marketing, going on shows like these to promote their books, going on other podcasts, going on social media, doing live launch parties. And each path has its own set of trials and hurdles. But I definitely feel, especially for first-time authors, generally speaking, the second path is the most enticing. But you run into the issue of unrealistic goals and expectations. And the hard truth that I've learned myself, that I think all authors should understand, is that in the publishing world, there is no guarantee that your debut novel is going to give you the success you want. Now, there are exceptions to that rule. There are authors whose first books launch them to award-winning status, and that is incredible. All the power to them. That is not an easy thing to do. But generally speaking, you have these highs and lows that go like a roller coaster, and that can be deflating for a first-time author. Because another thing to note is that this is not an industry that's going to make you large amounts of money just like that. It is a hassle. It is a series of hurdles just to promote one book before even going into a series. And unfortunately, I've had a lot of authors who have said that their friends who have gone into this industry for the wrong reasons, their passion dies within a few months. So ultimately, Tatum, I turn over to you to hear your thoughts on this discussion that while, yes, it is true that your first book may not give you the success you want, it shouldn't stop you from being a great storyteller if being a storyteller is something you want to do.
So I absolutely agree with this whole discussion is actually like such an interesting concept. So for me especially, the writing's never been about the money. So even like publishing my first book, it's never been about the actually selling it. Yes, I'm delighted to sell copies. I love when people connect with new readers. What author doesn't enjoy that? As you said, like it's nice to get
Of
some money as
course.
an indie author because it's very rare for us. But for me, it's more about the community around writing because I think that, especially through social media, as I've met so many other authors, and having that connection with the other authors has meant like the world to me. And so, with that, hold on, I'm blanking again. But with that, I just find the community so important, and the whole storytelling aspect is really what draws me to writing. So I've always loved storytelling, as you can probably tell from like my little story about my past and everything. Um, I very much enjoy storytelling. So for me, it's definitely not about the capital like part of it. Do I want to be like a famous author and like sell a bunch of copies? Absolutely. But do I expect that? No. And so it would be spectacular if I did. But like maybe this video will resurface in 4 years and I'll be like crazy famous, but probably not. So
You never
but
know.
you never know. True, true. But I think for me, it's also about when you get to that point where you're trying to make money off of the books, I think people lose their passion. So I think there's a lot of
Absolutely.
authors that you have to kind of find the balance because yes, I intend for this to be my career. Like my goal is to go into writing as a career. Like I'm studying that in college next year, and that's my goal. But I don't expect like all of my financial status. What do you even say? Like financial to come from my books. So I
Right.
think what you have to find when you're an author is that you have to find the balance between selling your books and like enjoying the art itself. And so like for me, I'm very conscious of that because I don't want to get wrapped into the I want to sell this many books and I want to do this and I want to do this that way because then I lose the heart of it and that's where it was driven from. So I think for me it's very important to kind of you can have both, but you have to find a way for them to coexist or you'll lose like who you are as an author and you'll lose your voice. So
Absolutely. And also maybe to help like refine what you were saying, it's almost like a balance between do you want to, write for like it's your passion and then have that commercial mindset because you want to be a commercial writer. That is a commitment. Like I'm going to publish this book in 3 months. Okay. That is a commitment. That is a mindset and mentality. And I actually knew one author who's a great friend of mine. He lives in Japan. His goal is to publish 15 novels within 10 years. He's already reached like the halfway mark. I think he's got about 6 or 7 books, and he's not even at like the fifth year mark. And that is a commitment I have not
wow.
seen in any author. But it's again this mentality and what you want to be. As you said, yes, you can have this balance. But if you don't and you want to choose, that's again a reflection into yourself of what kind of author you want to be. And also to add further, for authors, we have to understand again, our first book may not be the start. That's okay. It may be our fifth, maybe our sixth, maybe our seventh, 10th, or 12th. Whatever book gets our name out there, that is fine. Because then you can say, hey, if you've enjoyed this book, check out the other ones to see my growth. And boom, you have a new set of readers and new fan base. And a quote that I remember from a previous guest really resonates to that. Grit transforms into talent because we only get better as time goes on. And I can definitely tell you, an author's first book is not the same as their 15th. It's vastly different, and that is completely fine. And I definitely think another thing to know before we exit out of the business side, and I think you brought it up earlier, Tatum, is, social media, book talk, and bookstagram connections. Connections are huge for indie authors and even just authors in general to me, not just new readers, but also new authors, new groups, and to see, okay, what has worked for them? Oh, this person has some good connections and just building rapport. So for you, Tatum, are there any personal shout outs you want to give to any authors or any readers who have helped you understand the industry and business a little better?
Absolutely. So when it comes to do you want me to give like famous figures that have like kind of boosted me and also like maybe smaller ones that I also know
Any person
anything?
you want.
Okay, there's a couple then for sure. So first of all, Indy I.R. Miller, she wrote Soul Savior and Siren Song. If you're looking to interview another author with a crazy cool backstory, I would highly recommend her. Um,
I'll keep that in mind.
when I first joined Writergram, I had not been ready to publish my book at all yet. She actually is the one who showed me how to do all the publishing stuff. She showed me all the formatting. She showed me like basically everything. I owe her everything. And she's actually one of my closest friends to this day. So even though I met her on Writergram, we're actually friends in real life now and our families visit each other. So it's been really cool.
Ooh, nice.
So I got to meet her like a couple months ago and it was great. So she's definitely probably the one of the people that pushed me the most and made me who I am today with my writing. And so I love her for that. She's amazing. When it comes to famous figures, John Green. I have OCD, so does John Green, and for me, seeing that same disorder, which is somewhat like niche, in another author, is really inspirational because if he can like he wrote Turtles All the Way Down, and that book like has a special place in my heart for sure because like if he can write about his experiences and he can push past all this to keep pursuing what he loves, and so can I. And then a third one, Emily McIntyre. These are three totally different authors for the record. And so she writes like dark romance. And you know what? That's cool. Good for her. And so there was a thread that I'd posted because I was dealing with a situation with a classmate who was jealous of me and tried to write fake negative reviews. It's a whole other story.
Mm.
And I posted this thread and she actually responded to it and she told me to like ignore the haters and whatever and was kind of like laughing at the person who did it. And she really like inspired me because like she actually started as an indie author and she's actively battling cancer, like stage 4, I think. And so
Wow.
seeing that as an author, she started out small just like I am right now. And she's now this like massive like best-selling author. Like her books are in Target. So um it was really cool for me to like be like uplifted by her like personally and then to see that she can go so far after coming from basically where I came from too. So it definitely all three of those people are probably three of the most inspirational people that I've met so far. Well, not met, but like you know what I mean. So but yeah.
Absolutely, 100%. And I think that is amazing. And correct me if I'm wrong, this may be the other brother, but did one of the Green brothers write the book Fault in Our Stars by chance? Was that Hank or was that his brother?
John Green's the author. I think Hank does more science. Could be
Okay.
completely wrong. But
Okay.
they
I
have like a
couldn't I
podcast
couldn't tell, but
together.
I remember that book a lot and it was like huge. And also movie was fantastic. But I'm actually glad that you've been able to like have those like incredible interactions in varied forms, which I think is absolutely beautiful. And sort of like the last few questions before we get to the very end, Tatum. So here is the first question, which I think you've answered, but maybe you can go a little bit more in detail. There's an old question, and this question is about writing for validation in the sense that, as authors, we have, different reasons of getting into the publishing world. Some people want to be successful, be famous. Other people just want to just have their book out there, whatever reason. But ultimately, getting validation from our work, whether it's from an author that we've admired or a person we've admired, is very, very engaging and also a confidence boost because it's one thing to learn all this stuff and go into an industry to show what you can do. It's another thing entirely to have your peers recognize it and give credit where credit is due. So, what are your thoughts on this discussion in the writing community, Tatum?
So I definitely think I'm taking this the wrong direction, but I think there's authors, but specifically two different sides of it. There's a lot of
Mm,
authors that write for validation, and I know it's because I beta read for a lot of people right now. And I'm not saying this if anyone's like seeing this and I'm beta reading for you, this is not attack at anyone specific, but it's something that I've recognized throughout being on Writergram is that there are some people that will ask you to read their work and they'll like publish stuff that's like maybe not ready because they need the validation that their writing is good, so they feel like they've done something. I think there's a
right,
vast difference between needing the validation and writing because you love it. And so for me, like, yeah, the validation is great because when someone tells me that they love my book, like that's like just such a crazy compliment, honestly. So when someone tells me that they love my book, like, yes, I crave that validation. Well, author does not. But I also think you have to kind of find the balance between needing the validation from other people and also writing for yourself and for the story that you want to tell. So
absolutely.
that's been something that's been important to me. Like I recognize that in myself too, where I've caught myself like sending something because I want someone to tell me it's good. And I'm like, that's not what I'm here for. Like that's not what I'm
Mm,
here for. I'm here to write my story and make it the best I can be. I'm not here to have people be like, "Oh, your writing's good," and then like I move on, you know? So I'd rather
right.
put all the work I can so that people tell me it's good and then I'll feel good about it. So, absolutely.
Absolutely, 100%. And it goes back to this age old discussion is like, do you write for yourself or do you write for, other people? Because again, two different mindsets as we've been talking about. And that could be a whole discussion in of itself. But I think that has been answered in previous questions. So now we arrive at the final question of this incredible interview, Tatum. So here it is. With everything you've learned up to this point and still learning and improving upon for the next books in the series and other works, with the knowledge you've gained from friends, family, teachers, and other writers and other authors, what is your word of wisdom to fellow authors and writers watching or listening to this interview right now?
There's so many different things I could say, but I think the main thing I'm going to say is that they need to write for themselves because telling the story that lives within you is going to be the first step to being successful and to loving the art itself. So, that's definitely what I would say.
Absolutely 100%. And also to add on to that before we close tonight, viewers and listeners, write what you're afraid of. And what I mean by that is write outside of your genre because you never know. You may love writing poetry, you may love writing literacy fiction, you may love writing westerns, whatever. Write what you're afraid of because you never know. And ultimately, as Tatum said, write for yourself. Show that you can do anything in the writing world because it is an escape from reality because you're the one in charge. You can decide your own fate in your works. And with that, viewers and listeners, we conclude this amazing author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to Tatum for coming on the show, making her official debut on the channel. And hopefully, this won't be the last time we see her. Hopefully, we can have her back on the show promoting her second book in the Eclipse series. So, Tatum, where can people find and engage with you on social media, and where can people purchase a copy of In Solo?
So my primary platform is Instagram. If you DM me or whatever, interact my post on there, that's where you'll most likely get a response or any sort of interaction from me. So my handle is tatum.e.carrington. Pretty simple, just my name. And then I also am on TikTok with the same username, I believe. But I'm not nearly as active on TikTok at all. I mean, it's gonna get removed anyways in the next month, so it doesn't really matter. And then I'm hoping to start a YouTube channel at some point. I haven't gotten around to it, but now that I finally have a new phone with the space for it, I'll probably get on there and do that. And then my website is another great place you can engage with me. You can send me like an email request through there if you want to talk to me. My website handle is tatumcarringtonauthor.com. I own the domain, so you can do that. And then my books are available. All the links are on my website. And I think my website's linked in my bio on Instagram. But yeah, so the paperback is currently available on Amazon. You can order it on Amazon. Pretty much most countries, I think, that have Amazon, you can do it from there. And then the special edition, the like orange book, it'll be available probably in the next 2 to 3 months exclusively on my website. So if you're looking for the special edition, that's where it'll be.
Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for a late night author interview here on the channel. Again, a huge thank you to Tatum for making her official debut. And thank you, everyone, for joining us for the first week of authors. I am so excited. This week has been incredible. And if you follow my newsletter, make sure to stay up to date with the other guests coming soon in the later days. And as always, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe down below. And as always, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you all a wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world.